Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I'm Lisa.
And I'm Steph.
And together we are PD Connect.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you don't know who we are a San Francisco Bay Area nonprofit, but you can visit us wherever you are at and wherever we're at virtually.
Virtually anywhere in the world.
That's right.
From wherever you are.
That's true. I already said that.
Where?
Anyway, we have an amazing guest speaker today, Dr. Ray Dorsey.
Yes.
There's so many things to say about him, but we're just going to do a brief intro.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Or did you have something to say?
Okay. There's a lot to say.
Okay. All right. Thank you, by the way, for being here. Dr. Ray Dorsey is the director of the Center for the Brain and the Environment at the Atria Health and Research Institute. What are you doing over there? Okay. The center's mission is to identify the root causes of brain diseases from autism to Alzheimer's so that we can prevent them. With his colleagues, he wrote Ending Parkinson's Disease and Forthcoming, the Parkinson's Plan, which details a new path to preventing and treating this terrible disease. She's running away. Ray previously directed the Center for Health and Technology at the University of Rochester, chaired the International Huntington Study Group, led the Movement Disorder Division at Johns Hopkins, and consulted for McKinsey Company. In 2015, the White House recognized Ray as a champion for change for Parkinson's disease. Thank you.
He is a champion.
So much, yes.
These are
such a champion. Those are the books.
the books, folks.
Yeah.
This is the hard copy. And the
Okay, got it. We got it. Ray's here and ready to go.
we would like to also say that we are absolutely so thrilled and so grateful to have one of the world's top Parkinson's specialists in the world, folks. We are so lucky to have gotten this bit of time with Dr. Dorsey. So we want to say how wonderful that is.
And look how tall he is. That's a signed copy that we're holding.
Yeah, that was the old copy.
All right, on with the show, Lisa.
Yeah, and
we're frozen
again.
That's okay, that happens.
So let's go ahead and spotlight Dr. Dorsey and take it away.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you very much, Steph, for the very kind introduction. Let's see if I can get this thing rocking and rolling. All right, can you see my screen? Perfect. So I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to try to answer 3 questions that might be of interest to many of you. The first is, why do you have Parkinson's disease? How many are interested in why you have Parkinson's disease? Second one is, what can you do to slow your rate of progression? I assume that's of interest to everyone. I hope so. And then third, what actions can you take to reduce the risk or prevent your children, your grandchildren, your family, your friends, your spouse, your siblings from ever getting this disease? So we're going to try to tackle those 3 questions today, and then open it up to questions that you and Lisa and Steph might have. So our new book came out last month. Is now available you can purchase it wherever you'd like to purchase your books. And if you have a support group, you can even order bulk copies at like 40% off. I gave you a link to our website. I'm going to tell you about our goals and then a little bit about the progress. So first, the plan. So I think all of you know, or most of you know, that Parkinson's is one of the world's fastest growing brain diseases. In 1990, the Global Burden of Disease Study estimated that 2.6 million people had the disease. In 2021, just 30 years later, estimated 11.8 million people have the disease. No other brain disease looks like this. No other brain disease looks like this. This is not a natural consequence of aging. This is growing a lot faster than populations are aging across the world. And if you put a mouse in the laboratory and let it age, it does not spontaneously develop Parkinson's disease, or for that matter, develop Alzheimer's disease. The only way that mouse develops Parkinson's disease is if researchers manipulate its genes or expose it to toxic chemicals. The only way a laboratory animal develops Parkinson's disease is if researchers manipulate its genes or expose it to toxic chemicals. So I'm going to talk to you about both those causes. And in the book, we outline a plan, PLAN, to prevent the disease, learn why the disease begins, amplify the voices of those affected, and navigate the new frontier of treatments. And Michael and I wrote this plan because we view this graph as our report card. And it's on our watch that Parkinson's disease is one of the world's fastest growing brain diseases. And I think it reflects a failure of both Michael and me to meet the needs of the Parkinson's community, to prevent people from getting this disease, to treat them more effectively, and to bring care to them. Just like Lisa and Steph work on bringing their treatments to people, we need to do a better job of bringing education, of bringing prevention strategies, of bringing care, and bringing treatments to people who need them instead of asking people with Parkinson's who are already burdened by their disease and overburdened caregivers to come get those services from us. So I didn't, so I have to show you. So there was a great study called PD Generation that sought to answer the question of what are the genetic causes of Parkinson's disease. I suspect some of you participate in the study. It's a great study led by the Parkinson's Foundation. It offered free genetic counseling and genetic testing to just about anyone in the United States and other countries with Parkinson's disease. And they looked at the results of the first 8,000 participants. And of that 8,000 participants, 13% carry a genetic cause or genetic risk factor for the disease. 13% of Americans carry a genetic cause or genetic risk factor for the disease. Said another way, the overwhelming majority, 87% of Americans with Parkinson's disease, have nothing to do with any known genetic cause or genetic risk factor. 87% of Americans, the vast majority of Americans with Parkinson's disease, have nothing to do with any known genetic cause or genetic risk factor for the disease. Um, uh, in essence, the principal causes of Parkinson's disease do not lie within us, they lie outside of us in our environment. Chemicals in our food, water, and air are fueling the rise of Parkinson's disease, and as such, this disease, we can possibly modify its course, and we can certainly prevent the disease from ever happening. So what are these chemicals? And the book highlights three chapter ones about how certain chemicals in our food are contributing to Parkinson's disease or sprayed on farms. Second, it chapters on how chemicals in our water are contributing to it. Third is how chemicals in our indoor air, some of these chemicals like trichloroethylene, can evaporate from underlying groundwater or soil, much like radon does, enter people's homes, schools, and workplaces, and cause cancer and contribute to Parkinson's disease. And then chapter 4 is on how chemicals in our outdoor air, including air pollution, are contributing to Parkinson's disease. So hopefully most of you know about paraquat. I always like to learn. How many people have heard about paraquat? Okay, so fantastic. So paraquat's a weed killer. It's some consider it the most toxic weed killer ever created. It kills the weeds that Roundup doesn't. It's been used in the United Kingdom since I think 1962, in the US since 1963. So think about that. We have a weed killer that's been used for 60 years that's linked to Parkinson's disease. And that link came from Dr. Caroline Tanner, who in I think 2011 showed that farmers who were exposed to worked with paraquat had a 150% increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease. She's in your backyard. She's at the University of California, San Francisco, and is outstanding. In 2023, researchers down the 5 freeway at UCLA, Drs. Kimberly Paul and Beata Ritz, showed that you don't need to work with paraquat to be at risk. Simply living or working near where paraquat is sprayed is associated with a doubling of the risk of Parkinson's disease. So it's kind of like secondhand smoke. You don't necessarily need to be smoking the cigarette yourself to be at risk. Simply living or working near where people are smoking cigarettes, or in this case, spraying paraquat, puts you at risk. I'm going to give you a little California orientation. I assume many of you are in California, and you can see that one of the places that paraquat sprayed the most is in the Central Valley of California. So this is a real concern. If you take paraquat, if you expose mice to paraquat in the laboratory, they develop the features of Parkinson's disease, including some laboratory animals actually even developing a tremor. If you have a story about paraquat or exposure to it, I'd love to hear from you in the question and answer. Now, over 50 countries, including China, have banned paraquat, but the United States has not. In fact, based on data from the U.S. Geological Survey, the most recent data that I could find was 2018, which should be concerning in and of itself. The amount of paraquat sprayed in the United States, including California, has doubled. So not only is the United States not following the lead of China or England or other nations and banning paraquat, it's using increasing amounts of this weed killer that in the lab and in human studies has been tied to Parkinson's disease. The second chemical that I want to highlight is a chemical called trichloroethylene. And how many people have heard of trichloroethylene? Wow, outstanding. You guys are great. I didn't know about it until 2018 when Dr. Caroline Tanner asked me, do I know about Camp Lejeune? And I didn't. And she asked about Camp Lejeune because it was contaminated with this chemical. It's trichloroethylene. Many remember little high school chemistry that water is H2O. It's made up of 6 atoms. Trichloroethylene is made up of a whopping 6 atoms, 2 carbons in black, 1 hydrogen in white, and 3 chlorine atoms in blue, hence its name, trichloroethylene. It's got a cousin, it's called perchloroethylene or tetrachloroethylene, that's got 1 additional chlorine atom in blue, and that's widely used in dry cleaning. Fortunately, I think California, I think it's the only state in the nation that's banned the use of perchloroethylene in dry cleaning. Dr. Tanner and Dr. Sam Goldman, also again in San Francisco, demonstrated that in twin studies, in a moderately sized twin study, that these chemicals are associated with a 500% increased risk of developing Parkinson's. 500%. Trichloroethylene is also known to cause cancer, and according to the EPA, perchloroethylene, I believe, is a likely carcinogen. Now, why did I spend all that time talking about trichloroethylene? Is because I think it might be the most important cause of Parkinson's in the United States. It's contaminated up to 30% of groundwater in the United States, at least in the early 2000s. In 1970, 10 million Americans worked with the chemical, and scores of sites, military, commercial sites have been contaminated with trichloroethylene. It's widely used, used to be used to dry clean clothes. It used to be used to decaffeinate coffee. It used to be used as an anesthetic for pregnant women, and it's still widely used as a degreasing agent. And here's a partial list of occupations associated with trichloroethylene exposure. And this list, I think, is in chapters probably 2 or 3 of the book. And if you worked in one of these industries, I'd love to hear your story. I give you my email info@pdplan.org in the chat. But if you were an aircraft or jet engine mechanic, if you were an automobile worker, if you worked as a dry cleaner, as a painter, as a printer, as a shoemaker, as a taxidermist, or varnish worker, you were quite possibly exposed to trichloroethylene. If you cleaned carpets or cleaned guns, you were possibly exposed to trichloroethylene. And there's a wide number of industrial and military uses for this chemical. I don't know if I said in 1970, 2 pounds per American were produced. It was in typewriter correction fluid and in decaffeinated coffee. And there are scores of contaminated sites in the United States. This is just a map of Superfund sites. These are the most toxic sites designated for cleanup by the federal government, by the EPA. Over half of Superfund sites in the United States are contaminated with trichloroethylene. Over half of Superfund sites are contaminated with trichloroethylene, including, I think, 15 along a 7-mile stretch of the 101 freeway in Silicon Valley. So if you live in Silicon Valley, you live near a Superfund site that's contaminated with trichloroethylene. And it, because it was widely used in the Silicon Valley to clean off electronic silicon wafers, because it's a great solvent and it whisks away waste and degreasing. So if you worked in Silicon Valley or lived in Silicon Valley, you are likely living close to a Superfund site. And you probably don't even know it. I visited, I don't know, dozens of Superfund sites. I'm a little crazy. And I used to think that they have had men in hazmat suits and fences with danger, danger signs and security checkpoints. Most Superfund sites I've seen are completely unmarked. The ones in Mountain View are most of them are completely unmarked. You would have no idea that you are living near a Superfund site. In fact, the first Superfund site in the country was in Love Canal, not too far from where I used to live in Rochester, New York. And I visited that Superfund site. There was a fence around part of it, but the only marking of the first Superfund site in the entire country is a plaque that's surrounded by 3 trees that details the timeline of how electronics or a chemical company had dumped chemicals into a canal, leading to these chemicals coming up into people's basements and backyards. New York Times recently reported that people living in Love Canal today have no idea about its toxic past. In addition to these Superfund sites, there are thousands of contaminated sites. In Rochester, New York, we mapped out over 100 sites contaminated with trichloroethylene or perchloroethylene, including four where I lived, in the suburb where doctors and lawyers live. There were four within 5 minutes of where I lived, none of them marked. So that's trichloroethylene. And then air pollution is increasingly being identified as a risk factor for Parkinson's disease. So Dr. James Parkinson had the first major description of Parkinson's disease in 1817, and he did so in London. And in 1817, there was no trichloroethylene, although this has been around for 100 years. And there were no synthetic pesticides. They weren't really created until World War II with DDT. So what was Dr. Parkinson describing, and what was causing the Parkinson's disease that he identified on the streets of London when he described 6 individuals with the disease? I don't know, I think he was describing the chronic effects of high levels of air pollution. And so increasing number of studies have linked air pollution to Parkinson's disease. And when you look at air pollution in Los Angeles or, Bay Area is cleaner than LA, or Central Valley, California, and you see smog, you're seeing little pieces of dirt and soot. Scientists call those pieces of dirt and soot particulate matter. Most are big enough that we cough out or sneeze out, but some are so small, 1/30th the width of my hair, that they penetrate the nerve responsible for smell that hangs up in our upper nasal passages. And hitchhiking on those pieces of particulate matter are toxic metals, lead from leaded gasoline, iron from brakes, platinum from catalytic converters, and they can take those toxic metals back to the part of the brain and contribute to misfolding of a protein called alpha-synuclein. And the most common place you find the pathology of Parkinson's disease is in the smell center of the brain. One of the earliest features of Parkinson's disease is loss of smell. And you can actually go from the smell center back to the part of the brain that's affected in Parkinson's disease called the substantia nigra with one stop. Instead of stopping in O'Hare, if you're going from San Francisco to LA, you stop in the amygdala, which connects the olfactory bulb right back to the substantia nigra. Those of you who are more scientifically inclined probably know that this misfolded protein can spread from nerve cell to nerve cell, and you can get there from the olfactory bulb with just one stop in the amygdala and get back to the substantia nigra and contribute likely to the motor features that we classically associate with Parkinson's disease. Dr. Brittany Krzyzanowski in this map highlighted, and her colleague Dr. Brad Reset at the Barrow Neurological Institute in Arizona, mapped out areas of the country that have high levels of particulate matter and high levels of Parkinson's disease in red in the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys, and then identified areas of the country with low levels of particulate matter and low levels of air pollution in darker blue, and those are in the Mountain West. And so this is a big concern for Parkinson's disease. Even studies have suggested that even individuals who already have Parkinson's disease, who are exposed to high levels of Parkinson's disease, may have a faster rate of progression and are at increased risk for being hospitalized due to their Parkinson's disease. So if you have Parkinson's disease, breathe clean air, and I'll tell you how to do so. And as much as particulate matter and air pollution has been linked to Parkinson's disease, it's even probably a much bigger risk factor for dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So what to be done? So in the book, we highlight actions that you can take as individuals, actions you can take in your community, and actions you can take nationally to change the course of Parkinson's disease for yourself and for your loved ones. So in the book on page 237, we give you the Parkinson's 25. So if you don't like to read and you just want to get to the main point, you can skip to page 235, in which we give you 25 actions you can take as individuals. Thank you very much, Lisa, to slow the rate of progression of the disease likely if you already have the disease, and to prevent it if you don't want your kids to get it. And it's very, very simple. It's easy to read. It's got pictures. It's no more than 150 words. Most of these actions are inexpensive. Some are free. And they can all favorably change the course of Parkinson's disease in all likelihood. We know that individuals with Parkinson's disease, some people have slower rates of progression and some have faster. I think one of the reasons might be that some people are still getting exposed to the chemical, Like someone with lung cancer is a smoker, someone's still smoking the cigarette, whereas other people have stopped smoking. Second is in your communities, we can stop using pesticides on kids' schools and on playgrounds and on golf courses, or you certainly use less. I didn't know until I wrote the book that routinely pesticides are sprayed on kids' schools and playgrounds. Fortunately, in California, you have something called the Healthy Schools Act that started because Robin Sewell, who we talk about in the book, was concerned after she dropped her 5-year-old kindergartner off at Sherman Oaks Elementary School in Los Angeles. The child walked outside. A man in a hazmat suit was spraying pesticides. Her child has an asthma attack in front of her. He returns to his mom and says, "Mommy, Mommy, is that ever going to happen again?" And she said no. And because she said no, and because she made her voices heard, California has banned the use of the most toxic pesticides on kids' playgrounds and schools, and requires that schools notify parents in writing in advance of use of pesticides on their kids' schools and playgrounds. This should be a model, a common sense model that should be adopted nationally. And then globally, we give you actions in chapter 10 that you can help take. And I think the first one, first one we talk about is measuring the disease. So we know actually how many people have the disease and whether it's increasing or decreasing. But the one I'll talk about today is we need to ban paraquat. If 50 countries, including China, have banned it, the United States certainly can. England prohibits its use on the British population, but exports it to Mexico, Brazil, and the United States. If a weed killer is not safe enough for the British population, if it's not safe enough for the Chinese population, I suggest it's not safe enough for Americans. So this is the Parkinson's 25. It's not in color in the book, unfortunately, but it's color here. And I'll just read to you one of them, which is the first one, which is to wash your produce, even your organic ones. My guess is many of you do this already, but pesticides have contaminated our food supply. Remnants of pesticides are found in 20% of common foods. Organic produce, dairy products, and meat can reduce our exposure, but can still have unsafe residues of pesticides. So wash your produce at least with water and consider simple simple vegetable washes, vinegar or salt solutions too. Maybe for your audience here, enjoying wine without pesticides. We talk about in the book how Consumer Reports in France looked at French wines and they found residues of pesticides in just about every bottle that they tested. My colleague, Dr. Alexis Elbaz, did a fantastic study in France in which he looked at the use of pesticides in different cantons in the south of France where vineyards are found and found a near perfect correlation between amount of pesticide use and the prevalence of Parkinson's, near perfect correlation between pesticide use and the rates of Parkinson's disease. I think, I didn't give you more. There are other ones like using a water filter if you have a well, testing your well, considering minimizing your use or dry cleaning cautiously. Lots of very, very, very simple things that you can do in your everyday life. Happy to discuss these further with you. We already talked about the need to create pesticide-free schools and why can't we create organic golf courses. There's actually one organic golf course in Martha's Vineyard where the local population did not want pesticides to contaminate their aquifer. Why can't California create organic golf courses and lead the country in terms of this? I think many of you probably heard about the study done by Dr. Brittany Krzyzanowski and her colleague, Dr. Rodolfo Savica at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And they found that simply living within 1 mile of a golf course in Rochester, Minnesota is associated with a 126% increased risk of Parkinson's disease. Simply living near a golf course is associated with a doubling of your risk of Parkinson's disease. No clear, the reason's not clear, but very likely due to the fact that golf courses use up to 80 times as much pesticides per acre as are used on farms. We already told you a little bit about the need to ban paraquat. The EPA's own website says paraquat, that one sip can kill. And it's really, really unclear to me why we still allow this pesticide to be sprayed in California. Why, along with it, I think, are we sowing the seeds of future cases of Parkinson's among children. One thing I haven't highlighted yet is I think that the seeds of, the Parkinson's are planted early. The seeds of Parkinson's are planted early in life. You don't smoke a cigarette start smoking at 70 and get lung cancer at 72. You get lung cancer in your 50s and 60s because you're smoking as a teenager and 20s. And I think the same thing is true for Parkinson's disease, that the seeds of Parkinson's disease for many of you, and I'd love to hear your stories, are planted early. We mentioned the Camp Lejeune study. The Marines who were studied at Camp Lejeune were one, healthy almost by definition, two, young. Average age was 20, so some were teenagers. Three, they were only exposed to the chemical for just over 2 years on average, 25 months, yet 34 years later had a 70% increased risk of Parkinson's disease. So I think the seeds of Parkinson's disease are planted early, and I can give you other examples of why it is. This is why it's really important to prevent your children and your grandchildren from getting exposed to these chemicals, because you want to set them up for a life without Parkinson's disease. I want our generation, I want everyone here on this call to be part of the generation that brings about the end of Parkinson's disease so we can talk about its fall instead of its rise. We also need to learn why the disease begins. And right now, out of every Parkinson's research dollar, only 2 cents, only 2 pennies are spent on preventing the disease. There are homes in California, near where some of you live, and homes in New York City, where I live, that are sold for more money every day than we as a society spend on preventing the disease. Homes in California and New York are sold for more money every day than we as a society spend on trying to prevent Parkinson's disease. And we wonder why it's one of the world's fastest growing brain diseases. Why your friends and family members, anyone that you know over 50 and even those under 50 are increasingly getting Parkinson's disease. And we do this even though the economic benefits of Parkinson's disease are enormous. All of you know the human cost of Parkinson's disease, and you also know the economic cost. The Michael J. Fox Foundation sponsored a study that estimated the economic burden of Parkinson's disease per American with the disease is about $50,000 per year. About $25,000 that is an incremental extra cost for Medicare, doctor's visits, prescriptions, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and another $25,000 in terms of lost income from people who have to give up work and increased caregiver support and other monies that people have to spend because they have the disease. If you do a little math, $50,000 per person times at least 1 million people with the disease, 1 million Americans with the disease, you get to $50 billion per year. If we prevented just 1%, if say paraquat was responsible for just 1% of Parkinson's disease and we got rid of paraquat, the economic benefit to society would be $500 million per year. What's $500 million? That's double what the NIH spent on Parkinson's research last year. That's more than the Michael J. Fox Foundation, the largest funder of Parkinson's research, spends per year. And that's actually, according to The Guardian, more than the global sales, not profits, global sales of paraquat. We as a society would be better off sending a check to the makers of paraquat for $400 million a year to have them not spray it than to continue to allow them to spray it in California and around the country. And then we need to amplify the voices of those affected. The people who change the course of diseases are not neurologists. The people who changed the course of HIV were not infectious disease doctors. They were people in New York City and in San Francisco, as depicted in the book and the band played on, who made their voices heard. In New York City, there was a great organization founded by the late Larry Kramer, Peter Staley, and others, whose motto was silence equals death. And for HIV, people with HIV in San Francisco and New York City in the 1980s, silence equals death. If they didn't make their voices heard, they died. The people who survived with HIV were those who were fortunate to live long enough until AZT was developed in the 1980s and protease inhibitors in 1995. And for Parkinson's disease, I think silence equals suffering, and it equals needless and preventable suffering. Ali Signorelli, a fantastic woman with young onset Parkinson's disease, says that Parkinson's disease has a PR problem. We need to make our voices heard so that we change the course of the disease for us, for everyone who's currently affected, and for future generations, just like the HIV activists have done so for themselves and for many people here on this call. Many of us, including me, quite possibly do not have HIV because of their activism. The number of new cases of HIV is at its lowest level since 1990 because we've taken action to, one, prevent the disease, two, bring care to everyone, and three, come up with more effective treatments. In chapters 8 and 9 of the book, Michael Oken tackles what are the most promising treatments for Parkinson's in the near term, in the next 5 years, in the midterm, 6 to 10 years, and the long term, in the next 10 plus years. And then we articulate 3 goals for Parkinson's disease. We say that in 10 years, by 2035, that everyone with Parkinson's should have access to levodopa. Most individuals with Parkinson's, most individuals in many countries do not have access to levodopa, even though it's cheap, inexpensive, and highly effective. It costs less than $1 a day in the United States. We don't find it socially acceptable that people with HIV do not have access to more expensive, complex, less safe, quite frankly, medications for their disease. We should not find it socially acceptable that people with Parkinson's go without treatment. Second, we need to increase the amount of research funding for Parkinson's tenfold. $250 million, just quite frankly, is not going to get it done. We've seen what increased research funding can do for HIV. We've seen what increased research funding can do for Alzheimer's disease. We need to vastly increase the amount of funds we spend on Parkinson's research. Instead of spending 2 cents on every research dollar on trying to find the cause and prevent the disease, we need to spend 2 dimes on trying to prevent Parkinson's disease. And last, and I think most powerfully, is that we should say by 2035 that the rise of Parkinson's stops. The rise of Parkinson's adjusted for age stops by 2035 in the United States and worldwide. In European countries which have cleaned up their air, which have banned the most toxic pesticides and stopped using trichloroethylene, the incidence of Parkinson's in Germany appears to be decreasing. The incidence of Parkinson's adjusted for age appears to be decreasing in Germany. In the Netherlands, they had a study called the Rotterdam study, which showed between 1990 and 2011, the incidence of Parkinson's dropped by 60%. A crazy drop in just a span of 20 years. Now, people question the results, but I looked back and levels of pesticides in people's fat dropped between 75 and 90%. Trichloroethylene levels in the Netherlands were at the lowest level since 1981, and air pollution was 50 to 90% better. If we get these chemicals out of our food, water, and air, we can prevent Parkinson's disease and bring about a halt in its rise. In 2036, if Lisa and Steph will have me back, we start talking about the fall of Parkinson's disease. So we're making progress. So in 2021, the EPA banned a pesticide widely sprayed on golf courses, sprayed on, according to one report, over half of apples in the United States, called chlorpyrifos. In the lab, chlorpyrifos damages the dopamine-producing nerve cells that are lost in Parkinson's disease. Unfortunately, the manufacturer sued, and the fate of that ban is unclear to me. Last year, sponsored by a Republican congressman from Florida whose brother died of Parkinson's and whose father has Parkinson's, and a Democratic congresswoman from Virginia who has a progressive supranuclear palsy, introduced a bill called the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. It passed the House 407 to 9 and unanimously passed the Senate, and President Biden signed it into law. It requires the federal government for the first time to create a federal plan to, 1, prevent the disease, 2, to slow it, 3, to treat it, and 4, to cure it. We need to make sure that that plan is developed in a timely way, because every delay that we're having means more and more people are getting affected with Parkinson's, getting inadequate access to care, and insufficient treatments to treat their condition. And then we need to ban paraquat. And so, and I'm going to leave you with actions that you can take as individuals right now, actions you can take in your community, and actions you can take nationally. And these can take minutes. The first one is you can join the PD Avengers. So if you haven't joined the PD Avengers, please do so. pdavengers.com. It takes you 30 seconds to do so. It's free. It's a global grassroots organization founded by 3 people, Larry Gifford, Sonia Mather, Dr. Sonia Mather, and Tim Haig, Sr., who all have Parkinson's disease, and they have nearly 10,000 members, and their goal is to improve the lives of people with Parkinson's disease and to prevent it in future generations. So if you haven't joined the PD Avengers, please do so. Anyone with or without the disease, I'm a member. This is something your kids, your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews, your friends and neighbors can all do so. pdavengers.com. Second, as Lisa and Steph indicated, I work for an organization that's focused on preventing diseases. We're trying to move healthcare from a reactive, sick oriented care to a proactive, preventive one. And we've created a registry that people can sign up for, in which we'll try to measure these chemicals in people's bodies, For example, with Parkinson's, do you have high levels of these pesticides or chemicals in your bodies, your blood, your urine, or your hair, and your environment? Are they in your water? Are they in your soil? Are they in your household dust? If you want to be contacted about future such studies, you can join it. You can scan this QR code, or you can just email me and we'll tell you how to do so, or you can just visit our website, pdplan.org. Second, thanks to Robin Sewell, if you're in California, pesticides should not be used on your kids' schools and playgrounds. But if you have children or grandchildren in other communities, tell them to stop spraying pesticides. Many of you can just simply call the school's principal, the parents can call the school's principal and say, can we stop using pesticides or stop using the most toxic pesticides? Kids don't mind weeds, kids play with weeds. We don't need to be setting up kids for future cases of Parkinson's, of ALS, or even of autism. I mean, there are reasons that why 1 in 31 8-year-olds in the United States have autism. I get concerned that nerve toxins that we're exposing children to could be playing a role. And finally, we need to ban paraquat. And so the EPA administrator is Lee Zeldin, former congressman from Long Island. And you can just email Administrator Zeldin. We give you his email address, zeldin.lee@epa.gov. He works for you, and tell him to ban paraquat. If 1.2 million Americans tell the EPA administrator to ban paraquat, we'll ban paraquat. And it's been 60 years in action. You know, I'm from suburbia, but I don't think farmers are using tractors from the 1960s. I don't think they're using irrigation systems from the 1960s. I don't think many of us are flying in airplanes or driving cars from the 1960s. If engineers can come up with safer means of transportation, chemists can come up with safer weed killers. So that's the end of what I wanted to talk to you all about. I think we have a chance to change the course of Parkinson's. I think we have a chance to prevent this disease for future generations. And when you have an opportunity to change the course of a disease, we should take it, because it's not necessarily always going to be around. And if the people who are most directly affected by the disease do not make their voices heard and do not champion efforts to change the course of the disease, it won't happen. We know the status quo is not working. If the status quo were working, Parkinson's wouldn't be one of the world's fastest growing brain diseases. 250 Americans would not be diagnosed with the disease today. 100 Americans would not die from the disease today. The status quo is not working. And Michael and I take accountability for that. And that's where we chart a new path to preventing and treating the disease in our book. And we give that to you. If you can't afford the copy, you can just email me at info@pdplan.org and we'll send you one. But if you can afford it, please purchase it and please share it with others so we change the course of disease for all people and for all time. Thanks very much.
Amazing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dorsey. Yes, there's lots of questions, and we're so thankful for that summary. The books have been ordered if you're local. They're sold out, which is a wonderful thing.
Yes.
No, they should not be sold out. They should be available on Amazon right now. The last time I checked yesterday, they should be mailing it August 10th. You can also go to our website if you have like support groups or things. Bulk orders start at two copies. So if you we're going to spend more than 2 copies. You can get it at Porchlight Books. I'll put that in the chat, and BookPal, which is where, quite frankly, I buy my books.
Yeah, our 25 additional books are coming from BookPal, and they said October 15th or 30th or something like that. So we'll get them. Anyways.
But most of us have already read the book.
Yeah, many people have. There are lots of questions.
Lots of questions in the chat here. How would you like us to do that? Do you want us to read those to you, or would you like to take that away?
I think I can tackle some of this. You can flag ones if I miss them. I saw one, like, how do we know that Parkinson's is rising? Not just because we're better doctors. One, I don't like to say that I'm necessarily a better doctor than my mentor, Dr. Ira Shilson. I think that one of the best clinicians around is Dr. Stan Fawn. I just don't think we're better. And there's no better diagnostic tests. There are better diagnostic tests for multiple sclerosis, for example. So that would, MRI, for example, and that might explain a rise in multiple sclerosis. But it turns out that multiple sclerosis is pretty flat, and Parkinson's disease, which hasn't had better diagnostic tests, is increasing rapidly. So even diseases for which we unquestionably are better at diagnosing stroke and multiple sclerosis, they're not decreasing. In fact, stroke is decreasing. Whereas Parkinson's disease, where there's no evidence that we're better at diagnosing the condition. is rising fast. If we were better at diagnosing Parkinson's, we'd say we have to be selectively better at diagnosing Parkinson's disease and not other brain diseases for it to be rising fast. And logically, that just doesn't make sense. In fact, we're pretty bad at diagnosing it. Studies done around the world suggest that we miss anywhere from 10 to 50% of people with Parkinson's disease. I think we're underdiagnosing it. I think all these things are understating it. So wildfire. So yeah, fantastic question. So wildfires have really high concentrations of particulate matter, and the particulate matter, I'm not sure if the particulate matter is the part that's dangerous. It may just be the Trojan horse, and it's picking up whatever else is burning.
Water
So,
vapor is out, and I've been spending a lot of time today.
Perfect. And then you can still hear me, Lisa, and stuff. Yeah, perfect. And so I think the wildfires, like for example, or in Los Angeles, it picks up like burning plastic, it picks up other toxic metals that might be in the air, bringing these things into it. The level of air pollution from these Canadian wildfires is really akin to what 1800 London was. So in I think 2022, the Canadian wildfires turned the skies over the Big Apple orange. And they've affected obviously Northern California, where you can't even see across the street. That was 1800 London every day. And so, yes, I get really, really concerned. I think short-term exposure might be problematic for people with neurodegenerative conditions. So I think it could be problematic for people with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. In our book, we talk about shutting your windows. We talk about getting air purifiers. I live in New York City, and we have an air purifier in our bedroom and an air purifier in our living room. And then I don't know if the short term is enough to give you the disease in and of itself. I think there has to be some level of chronic exposure. But yes, I get concerned about it. So there are a wide range of Parkinsonian disorders, including dementia with Lewy bodies and others. What's the common theme? I think the common theme is that they're all new. So seizures, strokes, and migraines have been described for centuries, if not millennia. People are big fans of the Bible. When St. Paul's on the road to Damascus and is struck down by blinding light and hears the voice of God, to neurologists, we think that might have been a seizure. But Parkinsonian disorders are new. The first major description of Parkinson's was not till 1817. First descriptions of what's multiple system atrophy was 1950s. First major description of progressive supranuclear palsy not till 1966. First description of dementia with Lewy bodies is 1976 by Dr. Kenji Kosaka, a Japanese psychiatrist, who in 1984, he wonders, is this a new disease? Question. So I think many of these Parkinsonian disorders are all new. I think they're all tied to the Industrial Revolution, to chemicals in our food, water, and air. These relationships have been understudied, but I'd be hard pressed to think that so many people have these Parkinsonian disorders. You can't be over 50 and not have a friend or family member affected by a Parkinsonian disorder. I think it's hard to imagine that we missed it. John Adams was age 90 writing letters to Thomas Jefferson and age 83 in 1826. And neither of them had Parkinson's disease. No one had Alzheimer's disease among the founding fathers that we know, and founding mothers from that standpoint either. So I think these are largely very rare conditions until the 19th century. I think another way to say this is for 99% of human history, humans have lived in a world largely free of these Parkinsonian disorders. And it's only in the last 200 years that humans have been plagued by increasing rates of these neurodegenerative disorders. Why do the majority of people with exposed to chemicals not get this disease? Well, we're good. Humans are resilient. Only 10% of smokers get lung cancer. The vast majority of people exposed to asbestos probably don't get mesothelioma. The vast majority of people exposed to benzene don't get cancer. The vast majority of people exposed to any toxin don't get the disease. Non-Hodgkin glyphosate, Roundup's been linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The vast majority of people exposed to that don't. The vast majority of people likely exposed to paraquat likely don't get Parkinson's disease. There have been few studies looking at this systematically, but the body's resilient and we're good at staving off diseases. But if you're not exposed to these diseases, if you're not exposed to these chemicals, it is highly unlikely that you'll get the disease. I don't spend any time worrying about getting lung cancer because I don't smoke and never have smoked. And many of you are probably in a similar way. And I quite frankly feel pretty confident I'm not going to get Parkinson's because I look back at my past and I don't think I've been exposed to the chemicals. I actually used to live above a dry cleaner in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania when I was in medical school. So I was concerned because the chemicals above a dry cleaner can evaporate and have been found in unsafe, unhealthy levels in apartments in New York City above a dry cleaner. So I worried about myself and my wife and my family. I called the dry cleaner. Unfortunately, they were just a storefront, at least that's what they said, and didn't do dry cleaning on site. If you're not exposed to these chemicals in your food, water, and air, you are highly, highly unlikely to get Parkinson's disease. The challenge is that we have no control over, in many cases, we have no control over our exposures. These exposures are involuntary and we're without our consent. When I see someone with Parkinson's disease, I see a robbery. I see that people have been robbed of their independence. I see caregivers robbed of their golden years because they've been exposed to chemicals in their food, water, and air without their consent, without their knowledge, and they're paying the price for it, whereas the people who produce those chemicals are not paying the price for it. Is there a skin test available? So there's a skin test that now is pretty good at indicating whether people have Parkinson's. You get skin sample from your neck, from your thigh, and from your ankle, and it can find that misfolded protein in your skin called alpha-synuclein. I haven't yet to order it, but I think it giving us a clue that the pathology of Parkinson's disease doesn't necessarily begin in the brain and likely begins in the smell centers we talked a little bit earlier or in the gut, and then ascends up the vagus nerve. And it's unclear how it gets to the skin, but it suggests that this misfolded protein is spreading throughout the nervous system. And that what I was taught in medical school, what I learned, it was maybe a little bit too simplistic, that Parkinson's isn't just affecting one part of the brain, it's affecting the whole body. And that's why I think a lot of people have a lot of the symptoms that they have, these motor and non-motor symptoms, is because different parts of the nervous system are being affected. Autophagy. So that's cells eating themselves, and so they die off. Brain waste, recent studies have showed that sleep helps clean out the waste in the brain, toxic proteins, for example, or chemicals, perhaps, are cleaned through a system that's been recently described by one of my colleagues at the University of Rochester, Dr. Macon Niedergard, and it called a lymphatic system, which kind of flushes out these toxins in the brain. One other thing on the pathology of Parkinson's is that all these chemicals, certain pesticides, trichloroethylene, air pollution, they generally work by damaging the energy producing parts of nerve cells. And your brain's only 2% of your body weight, but about 30% of your energy consumption. And the chief drivers of that energy consumption are nerve cells. And the nerve cells that are especially susceptible to these mitochondrial toxins might be those nerve cells in the substantia nigra, which are huge. They're twice my height. They're 4 meters in length if you stretch them out. They have a million different connections, and they're not insulated. They're not myelinated. So they have huge energy demands. And one of my colleagues said they're like a garbage bag, Ray, filled with jelly beans. And those jelly beans are mitochondria. And so these chemicals, certain pesticides, trichloroethylene, air pollution, all damaging the energy producing parts of cells. And so I get concerned about them. So I think how much help should we put on new treatments? Listen, some of you have been around the Parkinson's community for a long time and you've been promised a cure year after year. We do not promise you a cure in the book. We give you 25 actions that we think can favorably change the course of Parkinson's disease. And these are things that you can do in your everyday life. The analogy I told you earlier, if you stop smoking, within minutes of smoking your last cigarette, your heart rate drops. Within hours of smoking your last cigarette, carbon monoxide levels normalize. Within a year of smoking your last cigarette, your risk of heart disease decreases. Within 10 years of smoking your last cigarette, your risk of lung cancer is halved. If this happens for exposure to chemicals linked to lung cancer, what about stopping exposure to chemicals linked to Parkinson's disease? I'm hard pressed to think about why stopping exposure to these chemicals would not have a favorable course on the disease. it's hard to imagine that ongoing exposure would be beneficial. And so it'd be really hard to argue that stopping the exposure of these chemicals couldn't change the course of the disease. And then exercise, yeah, you all know the benefits of exercise because you got Lisa and Steph. One of my favorite studies published this year looked at exercise in colon cancer. It was a randomized controlled trial published in New England Journal of Medicine. And it took 60-year-olds, so many of you are around 60, who already had colon cancer, already had Parkinson's, for example, already had colon cancer, and already had chemotherapy. And they randomized them to receive either a brochure on the benefits of exercise or to get an exercise coach. They didn't get Lisa and Steph, but they got an exercise coach like once a week. And they got that for about a year or so. And they followed them for 8 years. The risk of colon cancer recurrence in the exercise group was just exercise 3 hours more of walking per week. That was on the average gain in exercise, 3 hours more per week of walking, 28% reduction in colon cancer reduction, 28% risk in colon cancer recurrence. The risk of colon cancer recurrence or death was something like 32%, 37% lower. For every 14 people who were in the exercise intervention group, every 14 people prevented one death. If that's true for the benefits of exercise in colon cancer, what would be true for the benefits of exercise in Parkinson's or with neurodegenerative diseases? And we know that exercise releases brain growth factors in the brain that likely protect the remaining nerve cells. By the time you get Parkinson's, 60% of those dopamine-producing nerve cells have died off. You want to protect vigilantly those 40% that you already have. And one way to do that, stop exposure to the ongoing chemicals, stop exposure to these chemicals. And 2 is to exercise. Am I missing anything, Lisa and Steph?
Yeah, there are a couple more questions there. I love that answer. You know, a lot of the people on this call do have Parkinson's, and I love when you just address to them directly. The question is, hey, doc, I've got PD right now. What can I do to slow the progression or to live my best life?
Yeah, and I think stopping exposure to these toxins, and we give you very, 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 very pragmatic things because Michael and I kept getting asked the question, and quite frankly, I got tired of being asked the question. So we wrote down 25 things that we think can favorably change the course of Parkinson's disease for you. And then these are 25 things that you can pass on to your friends and family to have them never get Parkinson's disease. And one's exercise, but we go way beyond just exercise.
There are a few.
Oh, one other thing on why some people get exposed to the chemicals and get the disease and others don't. One, those 13% of people who carry those genetic causes of risk factors might be at increased susceptibility. So the most common genetic risk factor is mutations in a gene called GBA. Dr. Caroline Tanner again and her colleague Dr. Ethan Brown showed that those individuals who carry mutations in the gene GBA, which is about 8% of Americans with Parkinson's disease, may have a heightened risk when exposed to pesticides. So people who have these genetic mutations might be at a higher risk for exposure to it. Second is that many people know that people vary in how they break down or metabolize medications. I think some people might have genetic variability in the way they break down. We do know that they have variability in how they break down pesticides. So people who are more slow to break down these pesticides, for example, might be at heightened risk to these exposures. The other thing on why some people get the disease and some don't, I think there's things around exposure, dose, duration, obviously, route of exposure, I think inhalation being more important, but I think timing. I think if you're exposed when you're young, you're at higher risk. You know, if your exposure is this much to a 2-month-old or a 2-year-old is going to mean a lot more than to a 20-year-old or to a 40-year-old. So I really get concerned about the timing of exposure. There are obviously interactions, genes, which we talked about, environment. So people exposed to paraquat and head trauma have that amplification of their risk. Luck likely, bad luck likely plays a role. And then there are modifiers, age, stress, other medical conditions like diabetes, for example, that could be influencing who gets it and who doesn't.
There are a couple more questions at the end there, if you can see. There's 3, 4 more.
FDA banned the use of trichloroethylene in decaffeinated coffee in 1977. If you go pick up your clothes, if you take your dry clean clothes and you put them in your car, you're breathing the chemicals when you're driving home. When you put them inside your home, you're breathing the chemicals inside your home. So get a green dry cleaner in California. I think perchloroethylene or perc has been banned. I think it's out. Let me know if I don't have that right. But if you're outside the United States or your friends and family are outside the United States, find a green dry cleaner that does not use perc. If you can't, then air out your clothes in the garage, take off the plastic bag, air them out before you bring them inside the home. Um, I think the medications, the most effective medication is levodopa, which simply replaces the dopamine that's lost. In the 1960s, researchers found that brains of people with Parkinson's had less dopamine in them than brains without the disease. And so they tried to give dopamine, that didn't work. And so they give levodopa, which is just an amino acid, it's just a precursor to the disease. So I don't think it does anything. And I think general consensus is that it does nothing to favorably or unfavorably change the course of the disease. Main thing is you don't want to go without the disease. Don't suffer in silence. We have a highly effective medication. As a clinician, I try to keep the dose small so that people minimize their risk of getting side effects of the medicine. What else did I miss?
There's a question about people with Parkinson's have shown amazing abilities in situations where they believe they were given a drug versus placebo trial. Please explain that ability to draw on another part of the brain.
Yeah, placebos, people benefit from placebos. I think placebo also benefit from placebo-controlled trials because they get increased attention, they probably get better care and better support, and having hope is a huge benefit. And as much as I, highlight all these negative things that are causing the disease, I think it's hopeful then. Listen, if you know the cause of it, if you want to get cured of a disease, a prerequisite to being cured of a disease medically is to know its cause. I can't think of a disease that we can cure medically where we don't know its cause. 1960s, bleeding ulcers is a top 10 leading cause of death. Some people are young enough to remember what everyone thought bleeding ulcers was due to stress. And so they told you to change your jobs and do all types of other things. Turned out bleeding ulcers were due to a bacteria, and we now cure peptic ulcer disease with an antibiotic. No one dies from bleeding ulcers, or it's extraordinarily rare to die from bleeding ulcers. When I was in medical training, people coming with bleeding ulcers all the time. Now we give them an antibiotic and it's gone. When shortly before I was in medical school, there was something called non-Hep A, non-Hep B. It was liver disease due to what turned out to be hepatitis C, a virus. We can now cure hepatitis C with a pill because we know what its cause is. If we know what the cause of a disease is, we get much faster access to getting a cure because you can screen drugs against the likely underlying cause of the disease. But I told you that trichloroethylene, I think, might be the most important cause of Parkinson's, and I'm sure I'm a minority of that, and I'm a little out there. But there have been 45 total studies on trichloroethylene in Parkinson's. 45. Michael Oken publishes that many studies in a month or in a year. 45 studies. We are just not investigating what are likely the most important causes of the disease. If we don't even bother to investigate them, how are we going to screen compounds against the toxic effects of this disease, of this chemical? And then we can slow and prevent the disease. We see that with lung cancer. We see with a wide range of other conditions. If you stop getting exposed to these chemicals, colon cancer, if we start exercising, you change the course of colon cancer. My guess is you change your diet for a lot of autoimmune disorders or cancers, you can favorably change the course of the disease. We have suggestions that that's true for a Mediterranean diet and Parkinson's disease. I think we're not paying close enough attention. We're not thinking critically enough. We're not paying attention to what the most critical issues are in Parkinson's disease. The status quo is not working. Michael and I are, we get upset about it. And instead of getting upset about it, we give a plan for individuals, for communities, and for societies to change the course of the disease for themselves, for their family, for their friends, and for future generations to come.
Thank you. We do have another question. Please talk about misdirected research and the funding and time that has elapsed. Dr. Alberto Espy's wrong hypothesis.
So I'll let Dr. Espy speak for himself. Dr. Espy is a great thinker, and he he
He is
thinks
actually
critically.
coming on to be our guest speaker in the new year.
Okay,
So yeah.
fantastic. So you can ask Dr. Aspe. But if we were devoting research funding in the right directions, we'd be making better progress. We in this century, since I've been in training since 2000, I don't think we've had any major therapeutic breakthroughs for Parkinson's disease. The most effective treatment for Parkinson's disease is a medication called levodopa from the 1960s. The most effective surgical treatment is deep brain stimulation from the 1980s. We're getting better with our treatment for levodopa. I think the pumps might offer a substantial benefit. Full disclosure, I've consulted for a company that makes one of the pumps. And Michael talks a lot about the adaptive deep brain stimulation, which it is. But the roots of those therapeutic interventions are from the 20th century. Perhaps the biggest breakthrough in the 21st century is a recognition that exercise is beneficial for people with Parkinson's disease. But we just haven't changed the course of Parkinson's disease. We've changed the course of stroke. We prevent stroke. The number of new cases of stroke in the United States, adjusted for age, is decreasing. We bring care to people with who have strokes. We bring care to them, through telestroke, telemedicine. We have highly effective acute treatments for stroke. Mortality due to stroke is decreasing. The number of people with Parkinson's with strokes is decreasing. Morbidity due to stroke is decreasing. But we, Michael and I included, have failed the Parkinson's community. And that's why we wrote this book, because we don't like failing. And we want to change the course for all of you, the 1.2 million Americans who have the disease, and for the 330 million Americans who don't have the disease. We want to bring about the end of the Parkinson's disease in our generation, so future generations worry about Parkinson's, read about Parkinson's disease in textbooks, and don't have it in their everyday lives. And if you don't think this ASCO is working, you got to make your voices heard. It's your money, it's your taxpayer dollars, it's your contributions to foundations, it's your contributions to researchers that that will change the course of the disease. The status quo is just not working. We need a new path, a new plan, and that's what we give you in the book. And it's an imperfect one, but it's a plan.
We're not into research, but we're not in the business of research, but we are in the business of neuroplasticity. And all about what we do is trying to get people to move better and function better so that they can live better. There's no research. I'm sorry. We're not that big. We're just focusing on each individual person. Can you speak on the importance of neuroplasticity and how maybe in the clinic you see people have real change in their ability to function?
Yeah, so we're doing this listening tour. I'm hanging out in Sioux Falls, South Dakota right now because we're going to serve communities around the country. And I was in Indianapolis, Indiana, I think last week, where Rocksteady Boxing was started. And I like one of my friends has Parkinson's. His name's Dan Cannell. He's actually in the book. And about a year ago, we started boxing together, non-contact boxing in Rochester. Great trainer, Javian. And so I wanted to do boxing and Rocksteady Boxing. And so they hooked me up with Johnny. And Johnny has Parkinson's disease. He said when he first came into Rocksteady Boxing, he was dragging his right leg. When he came in, he was barely bringing his right arm. And he said he knows two people from Rocksteady Boxing in Indianapolis who've basically gotten out of wheelchairs and doing better because of exercise. Lisa and Steph are shaking their heads. These are anecdotes, not evidence, but they're shaking their heads because I think we're underselling the benefits of exercise. Well, then we got in the ring, and Johnny, who's 10 years my senior and has had Parkinson's disease for 10 years, kicked my behind. So here it is, somebody 10 years my senior, 10 years of Parkinson's disease, and I'm in decent shape, and he kicked my behind. I was getting huffing and puffing, and he was going strong. So I think we might be underselling the benefits of exercise. I think we might be underselling the benefits of vigorous exercise. I routinely recommend that all my patients, if they can, to exercise at least an hour a day. And I always say if I had Parkinson's, I would do 2 hours a day. Boss Bloom, who helped us write the first book, you should have him on as a guest. He's been looking at neuroplasticity and showing, for example, on functional MRI, changes in people with Parkinson's in their brain following exercise. So I think there's increasing evidence at a biological level, imaging level, and a functional level that exercise is beneficial and that we might be underselling it. Again, that colon cancer study, I mean, I'm hard pressed to think about how exercise helps colon cancer. I think it's much easier to think how colon cancer could help Parkinson's disease. But you have immense benefits, including in reduction in mortality and colon cancer. this, I think, really signals what the benefits could possibly be for Parkinson's.
Well, we definitely love exercise. And as a nonprofit that teach exercise and education for people with Parkinson's, we were wondering how we could position ourselves to be a resource that's listed in one of your next books.
Not even in your next book.
Or maybe
Wow,
this
right
book, like
now.
edition 2, maybe.
You know, you just gave the best testimony about
Yeah.
neuroplasticity. It's not necessarily any one particular thing. There are organized programs all throughout the country, but yeah, absolutely.
Especially those that have some component of social health, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So we would be delighted to put you in our next book. You just remind me that we do so, and we'll put you in the next book in resources. That's a deal and a half. And Michael and I are already working on their next book because we don't think these chemicals are just contributing to Parkinson's disease. We think these are contributing to a wide range of brain diseases from autism to Alzheimer's disease. There are reasons why 1 in 31 children, 8-year-olds in America have autism. There are reasons why 1 in 3 Americans who live to 85 will develop Alzheimer's disease. There are reasons that Parkinson's disease is the world's fastest growing brain disease. There are reasons why dementia with Lewy bodies is not described until 1976, and that it's that the first person to describe it wonders whether this is a new disease in 1984. If we find out what the causes of these diseases are, and you should do that in your everyday life, if you get diagnosed with a disease, find out what the cause is, ask the doctor what the cause is. You find out what the cause of the disease is, you can potentially cure it, you can treat it more effectively, you can slow it, and you can prevent it for your loved ones so that the disease ends with you. Parkinson's should end in this generation. Future generations should not bear the burden of this disease.
You know, we talked a lot about the money going to research, a lot of money, not enough money, but a lot of money. How do we get the money to come to exercise programs, community benefits, and Medicare, anything? Have it covered for life because people need to exercise every day for the rest of their life. We all do.
Which is why we're donation based only, right?
Yeah. So this is all money comes either from taxpayers or philanthropy or industry. And taxpayers and philanthropy, that's everyone listening here. If people make their voices heard, look, HIV activists had far greater uh, uh, odds stacked against them than even people with Parkinson's disease. Granted, they were younger. Granted, they weren't healthier. They may have had a little bit more financial resources, a little bit more education. But that was about it. They were blamed for their condition. Doctors refused to care for people with HIV. Hospitals would not admit patients with HIV. President Reagan was really slow to respond to it. And they changed the course in 8 years. In 8 years, they found their voice to protease inhibitors. March of Dimes, 17 years from the beginning of March of Dimes to Jonas Salk holding up a polio vaccine. Mothers Against Drunk Driving in California, Candace Lightner, her 13-year-old daughter, struck by a drunk driver at age 13. 4 days later, Candace Lightner is petitioning the governor of California, Jerry Brown, to make drinking driving illegal, to raise the blood alcohol level, lower the blood alcohol level to 0.08, raise the drinking age to 21. Because of her activism, 8 years later, in just 8 years, 10,000 fewer children, Americans, schools, families, communities torn apart because of 10,000 lives saved per year from because drinking and driving is socially unacceptable. We have lots of examples where we've changed it. CFCs are gone. DDT is gone. Air quality in Los Angeles is 50 to 90% better than it once was, with more people driving more cars, more miles, and the economy never being better. So there are lots and lots of examples, but people need to make their voices heard. The 1.2 million Americans need to make their voices heard. Steph and Lisa and friends and family members need to make their voices heard. That's the challenge of our generation. We need to start thinking about creating something in this country. And I think we can create a country that's largely free of Parkinson's disease. And we can do that by getting rid of chemicals in our food, water, and air.
I love that. We've said it before and we'll say it again. We love your passion. Just wanted to find out, do you have a few more minutes? There's a couple more questions.
Sure. Okay. A couple more
Okay.
that my voice is going to give out.
Okay.
Well, one I can see is in processed food, the impact of added sugar. Boy, I would love to hear this answer. Sugar.
So sugar, it's increasingly clear. Alistair Noyce, a great, I think he's a Parkinson's a neurologist at the United Kingdom, has really shown that high levels of blood sugar diabetes is unfavorable for the brain. If you want a healthy brain, don't breathe polluted air. Avoid getting diabetes. If you have diabetes, control your blood glucose. These are all things that can favorably change the course of the disease. These are within our control. And then, you know, when I see ultra processed foods, I see pesticides. And so a very popular cereal that people feed to their children, they found pesticide in that cereal. So when I see ultra processed foods, I see pesticides. And if I have Parkinson's disease, I am not letting pesticides get to my brain. Avoid them. Buy organic, wash your fruits and vegetables. I know people say organic is expensive. Organic is expensive because we subsidize conventional farming and we don't subsidize organic farming. 99% of agricultural subsidies in the United States go to conventional farming, 1% goes to organic farming. And we subsidize conventional farming on the back end with Parkinson's disease. And instead of putting the upfront costs on the pesticide manufacturers, we put it on the people who are directly affected by the disease, by American taxpayers. If we stop these subsidies for conventional farming and for pesticides, we can all live longer, healthier lives.
All right, 3 more questions. Oh, no, you already read that. Why are Superfund sites not marked?
Because we haven't asked and required them to be. Tell your representative, yeah, I forgot who the representative from Silicon Valley is. Fantastic woman. She recently retired. Mark them. And that's one of the things in Chapter 10. We give you a plan, and one of the things is give the citizens right to know. If a golf course is spraying toxic pesticides on it and you live near a golf course, don't you have the right to know? If a farm is spraying a neurotoxin on its crops, and you live nearby, don't you have the right to know? Or if your children go to a school that's near a farm, children go to schools near the farm, don't you have the right to know? If you live near a toxic site, don't you have near to know? Just before I got on this thing, one of my colleagues at the University of Rochester emailed me because five teachers in suburban Rochester, a nice suburban school district, had developed Parkinson's disease, and they're wondering, why is that? And I found in a 3-minute search 2 sites contaminated with trichloroethylene that are within miles of where their school is. Now, I don't know if that's why it is, but that's just in the last hour or this last 2 hours that this has happened. You have the right to know. If they have the right to spray toxic pesticides on kids' schools and playgrounds, you have the right to know if they are doing so. And if you live near a toxic site, you have the right to be informed every year of that toxic site and the status of its cleanup so that you can protect your friends and family members.
All right. If the US uses most pesticides in the world, is our incidence of PD much higher than other countries?
I'm not sure if we use the most pesticides in the world. I just don't know that. I should know that. The countries, the 3 countries that have the highest rates of Parkinson's disease in the world are Canada, 1, US, 2, 3, Argentina. Until 2022, I believe, all 3 countries use paraquat. So the 3 countries that the highest prevalence of Parkinson's disease, Canada, United States, and Argentina, were 3 of the countries that had not banned. I don't think Canada still hasn't banned paraquat. I'm not sure if that's a coincidence. I would tend to think not. The areas of the world that are undergoing the fastest rise in the rates of Parkinson's disease the fastest is China, which has had vastly increasing uses of pesticides, vast decline in air quality until recently. Actually, China is now getting serious about improving its air quality, and half the market for trichloroethylene, I think, is in China.
Well, this has been incredible. We've taken you over the time, and we appreciate you again for coming, and we can't wait for you to come back and talk to us more. For those of you that don't know us and maybe missed the intro, that's Lisa, I'm Steph, we're PD Connect. We are in our 10th year as a nonprofit. We teach exercise and education for people with Parkinson's, and we'd love to be a resource for you. Please check us out at pd-connect.org.
And we are donation based. We rely
no membership fees.
You.
Yes.
Just
to
like
keep going.
Research relies on anyways, I'm not going to go down that again.
Okay.
But this is going to be on YouTube, and watch Dr. Dorsey's original interview with us about ending the Parkinson's. That's another deep dive.
Another deep dive, which is amazing. Watch them all. They're all available on our YouTube channel for free. Check it out. It's if you just type PD-Connect, you'll find us. It's orange. And there's lots of guest speakers, lots of information out there. Start with Dr. Ray Dorsey. We've got Boss Bloom, we've got Mike Oken, all the peoples. So check them out. Thank you all. Thank you again, Dr. Ray Dorsey.
Yeah.
We appreciate you so very
So
much.
much
for-
out of your incredible
schedule. You're traveling the world. We love this, and we thank you. We can't thank you
We
enough.
hope you
actually.
come through in person because
Yeah, we'd love to see you
yeah.
again. Yeah, let us know when.
End of January. End of January, I'm coming to Southern California, so maybe we'll make my way up to Northern
All right,
California.
road
too.
trip.
Sounds great. Awesome. Excellent presentation, everyone's saying. So informative, and thank you so much. Have a great afternoon or wherever you are, whatever time it is.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.